we are excited to bring to you today the Freedom Formula. This is a webinar about your path from captive to independent. And this is definitely a niche market in regards to insurance agencies. But webinar is being hosted by the consulting firm of DPILLC and also Renee Scott Insurance Agency, which is located in Tampa, Florida. So, just to let you know what we are going to be covering today, we're going to talk about how the insurance market has shifted. The landscape of what we know about insurance has completely shifted. So, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what does it mean? What is a true comparison between being captive versus independent? We're going to talk about 5 critical factors that you need to make before you think about moving. And you being on the call today, whether you're watching this on replay or you're in our audience live, there are information that you need to know to just gather, not necessarily making decisions, but just gather within a certain time period. So, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why having a business consultant changes everything in regards to opening up an independent agency. Renee is going to share her personal journey from being a captive agent to being independent, and then we'll have some Q&A and next steps. And what is exciting is DPI LLC. I'll tell you a little bit about who we are as an organization. We are a high impact consulting firm, and we really focus on allowing business owners to keep profit in their business. We do this through one-on-one consulting. We have retainer clients that we work with, but we also do educational program, leadership development that we do with workshops, economic development teams, as well as corporations and municipalities. So we're excited to be able to sponsor this event. I want to tell you a little bit about Renee and what our goal is today. Today is truly about Renee wanted to provide information so that those that are thinking about a transition, whenever there is a transition, it is very challenging in regards to the timeline. What do I do? What do I not need to do? And so this is about you making the best decision for your career on your own terms. So, who is Renee? Just a little housekeeping. We're going to keep everyone on mute. We want you to find joy in expanding the perimeters of what feels comfortable. And also, as you stay on mute, we're going to save the questions to the end. We know that this can be a very confidential. You can be working one place and thinking about a transition, so we don't want to put names out there. So we will definitely keep the names confidential. And so wait until the end, stop the recording, and then answer questions. If you don't want to forget what your question is, we want to make sure that you will um, put it in the chat, and then we will answer that question. Okay. So let's introduce who Renee is. Did I put Renee on here? So I get the esteemed honor of being able to introduce someone who is very special to me, which is my identical twin sister, Renee Scott. She is founder of Renee Scott Insurance. She is co-founder of DPI LLC. She had 23 years with State Farm. She was a former captive agency owner, so she understands the ins and out of and the logistics of that. She is now a successful independent agency owner. Renee Scott Insurance is the agency that she owns in the Tampa area. And she is licensed in both Florida and Georgia. And I think graduate from the University of Florida. Florida. She has a deep expertise with business strategy and leadership consulting. She is known for simplifying complex insurance concepts so clients can confidently choose protection that fits their unique situation, not someone else's. So please help me welcome Renee. Renee, we are so happy to have you here today.
I am so glad to be here. Hopefully, I won't have any technical difficulties because we're in the midst of a really strong storm where I am. I wanted to have this webinar because the landscape has shifted. And my sole purpose for doing this is to really just give some honest, practical information that I didn't have when I made the jump from at that point in 2020 State Farm into the independent world. And with the landscape changing, there is so much uncertainty amongst agency owners, especially if you are on the captive side, especially if you are one that received the information that could have been a little bit startling. But one of the things that I wanted to share, I wanted to open up with a statistic. 62% of all U.S. premium in the property and casualty space.
We're going to pause it here until we get Renee back. We'll be right back.
So when you think about that statistic, there is, if you're wondering or even exploring the idea of independent agency ownership, that is a big statistic for you to have. So the recent announcement about commission and benefit changes that are taking place with State Farm. They made that big announcement. It's been all over in the news. It has left people feeling a little bit unsettled, questioning their future, or wondering really what their options are. And so that is what this webinar is about, really just looking at what are your options, right? Not trying to sell anything, just looking at what are your options. Because uncertainty, as uncomfortable as it feels, is also an opportunity. Right? It creates a window, a time for you to pause, kind of look around, assess, and make some intentional decisions rather than reactive ones. That is what is the great thing about when you have this particular opportunity. Now, you're going to be best positioned by looking at what your options are early and not waiting until changes are in place. Now is the time, because not necessarily the ones who panic and move quickly are the ones that are going to make the right decision. Um, and they're not the ones who are going to put their heads down and in the sand and kind of ignore the changes. You know, you don't want to do that. But the agents who really, the agency owners who start exploring their options now, kind of calmly, strategically, and with good guidance, that's what's going to help you make the right decision. I am not here to advocate on remaining captive or advocating on becoming an independent agent. What I'm here is just to provide information that I want you to consider when making the change. So now let's look at what we're actually going to be comparing. And the comparison is between captive versus agent. And there are
Versus
pros
independent.
versus independent. I apologize, Ross, and thank you for that correction. So captive versus independent. And there are going to be pros and cons for both. And only you are going to be able to determine what is best for you. And one thing I want to suggest that you think about is, what is your pain point? What is making you even explore opportunities? What is making you even think about maybe there is another option for you? So what is that pain point? Because when you know kind of what the comparison is between captive and independent and what your own personal pain point is, it really helps to bring clarity on what's going to be the best move for you. So, as a captive agent, you've got real advantages, right? You represent a single carrier. That is good because there's not a lot of information that you have to intake. It's easy for you to quote. You can quote quickly. You have a built-in brand. You know, that name that you have is already built-in brand. You've got marketing support. You've got structured training. You've got resources. You've got leadership there that are advocating on your behalf and kind of prodding you and providing you information. The infrastructure a lot of times is already built for you. For a newer agent, wow, that type of resource and scaffolding is genuinely very, very valuable. Um, and so that is something that I benefited for years. But then let's talk about what are the pros of being an independent agency owner. You've got multiple carriers, and that is a pro, and it's also a con, right? Because it takes you a little bit longer to shop the insurance for your customers. But the fact that you're able to shop for them, the fact that you do have options for them, that's great. You have a higher commission potential. Typically on the independent side, especially from what was my contract when I was with State Farm and what my contract is now with my independent agents, my commissions are higher and they're not predicated on me selling financial services, right? Because when I was in the captive world, there were different tiers of your commission based on how you sold financial services. You don't have those limitations when you are an independent agency owner. You own your book of business. So when I get to the point where I'm ready to retire and no longer do it, I can sell my book, right? I have options. I can have my children take over my book of business. I didn't have that as a possibility for me as a captive agent. So if your pain point is, I want to fully own my book, then independent agency is going to be for you. I was able to build my own brand and culture, right? There are certain limitations that you have. You've got to use their logo, you've got to use their color, you've got to use their different social media post. But when you're independent, you are building your own brand, you're building your own culture. So going independent does not mean that you have to start over. So let's just take a look at that. When you become an independent agency owner, the myth is going independent means that you're starting over. That is could be no farther from the truth. Um, the truth is, you've got relationships, you have expertise, you've got reputation, and that is going to travel with you. Making that jump to independent, you're not going to lose that. You're changing your business model, but you are not erasing your career. All right. I want to make that absolutely because a lot of times, we'll say, oh, we're having to start from scratch, right? I was a scratch agent when I was with State Farm, meaning I had to build it from that very first policy. I was my first policy. And a lot of times we'll say, oh, if I go independent, I'm going to have to start all over. I'm going to have to start from scratch. No, you don't. You've built a relationship. People know you and your expertise, your reputation, that is going to travel with you. And so, again, you're changing your business model, but you are not erasing your career that you have built block by block. So,
I think that's so great that you are providing that information, Renee,
mhm,
because even when I moved from being in corporate retail to being a small business owner, I felt like I was just starting new. But those relationships, that network, like that support that I had built throughout my career, I just love this image that it travels with us, that we're not just, starting over. Yes, you're launching into something that is new to you,
mhm,
but you still have a foundation to build upon.
absolutely. So important. All right, so let's talk about the transition because this is what I have identified as five critical factors that you must consider before you move. And before you even consider these five critical factors, I want to go back to really think about what is your pain point. When you heard that news, when you're seeing the changes taking place in the company, what is your pain point? Your pain point may be I'm going to be losing money because of the announcement that is going to be made. The pain point may be I don't want to sell financial services. I don't want my success, my commissions that I'm being paid to be predicated upon me selling financial services. So really understand your pain point and then consider these five critical factors. And we're going to break them down one by one. I'm going to break them down one by one for you. First thing you got to consider is your book of business, your carrier appointments, your operational infrastructure, your financial runway. We got to talk about finances if we're talking about moving to an independent agency model. And then you've also got to talk about your support structure. All right. So let's talk about number one, and we're going to have that slide change to your book of business. The honest answer depends on your contract because that's the first question you're going to think about. And so, what happens to my clients? It really depends on the contract that you're currently in. If you are captive, most likely those customers are going to remain with your who you are selling for. So your portability or your ability to move your clients really depends upon your contract language, and you need to have an attorney review your contract. Also, realize genuine client relationships will tend to follow you. One of the things that I did was I kept my same website, I kept my same phone number, and that was very important because even though I had a 1 year kind of non-compete type of requirement, people calling in, we were able to still talk with them. So your book of business, you've got to consider. Factor number two is your carrier appointments. This is something that I want you to know. New appointments are going to take time to establish. It is typically, and we're going to talk about a timeline a little bit later, but normally for you to get those really good, solid carrier appointments, that can take up to 60 days. That is not something that happens immediately. One of the first reasons is because your current appointments have to be terminated. So there is, if you, let's just take, for example, State Farm. If you are currently appointed with State Farm, all of your appointments with State Farm have to be terminated. And that's not anything that you are able to control. Then once they're terminated, then you're able to apply. And some insurance companies want to interview you, others want to see your office. So there are a variety of factors that determine your carrier appointments. Your independent marketing agencies or your aggregators help to bridge that gap. I'm currently with an aggregator, and that helps to bridge the gap. They were able to open the door for me to get appointments versus me going to Progressive and saying, hey, I'm the owner of Renee Scott Insurance. I want an appointment. Or for me going to Geico, or for me going to Allstate. They were able to bridge that gap. A consultant is someone that you absolutely need to be having conversations with because that is going to help you accelerate your landscape, your time frame, having you think about all of the necessary parts of moving from captive into an independent agency. This is a space where I can't say it enough. Having a consultant is so valuable. All right, so now let's talk about factor number three that you need to consider your operational infrastructure. Um, there is so much that is provided to you from a standpoint of your software, your licensing, all of that information is provided to you through your captive framework. When you go independent, You now have to determine what is going to be your software, who's going to be your phone company, what quoting platforms are you going to use, what raters are you going to use, what CRM are you going to use. There is not a structure in place that is going to determine that for you. You have to make that determination for yourself, and your infrastructure is extremely important. Let me say that again. Your infrastructure is extremely important because how quickly you're able to turn that information over to the customer, that quote that they've asked you for, how soon you are able to communicate via text through your phone company, all of that matters from a customer service standpoint. And that is something that you're going to have to figure out on your own. Now, I know that seems kind of insurmountable when I say it, but it's going to be an investment of time and money, and you need to go in with eyes wide open with regard to what the finances look like. So, factor number four is the financial runway. I want to be straightforward because I think this is where people sometimes get surprised. Your income during the transition period is going to look very different than your income does now. Because I'm with an aggregator, I do have stability from a standpoint of I get paid twice a month. If you try to do it on your own and you have 13 different, let's just say, carriers that you represent, 13 appointments, they're going to pay you at different times. Some may pay on the 5th of the month, others may pay on the 10th of the month, others may pay on the 13th of the month. And so you're just going to get money coming in various times. That's why I do like an aggregator, and specifically the aggregator that I am connected with, because your pay is very structured. You get paid on the 5th, you get paid on the 20th. It just helps you to understand and also to create that cash flow for the bills that you are going to have too. The timing of new business, that was something that was a little bit different for me. There can be a 45 to 60-day lag when you close a policy and you actually get paid on a policy. You get those commissions sent over to you. So you got to honestly assess your personal financial situations, your savings, your current obligations, your lifestyle cost, and you've got to plan for that transition period. All
I
right?
have a question, Renee.
Yes.
Going back to the operational infrastructure, can you talk a little bit about how in 2026 it's so important how, when you're handling sensitive data and information and making sure that you have a very secure platform?
Yes, because your operational infrastructure looks like when when you're captive, you get the computer sent to you, and
Mhm.
all of the security methods are in place when you get that computer sent to you. Well, when you leave, if you decide to leave your captive agency, most likely you're going to have to turn all of that equipment in, phones, laptops, keyboards, all of that has to be turned back in. So you go and you purchase new equipment. You've got to make sure that equipment is secure because you're going to be receiving very sensitive data from your customer, from social security numbers, driver's license numbers. And so you've got to make sure that that is a part of your infrastructure, is the protection of your customers' information.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. All right. So I think we've talked about the operational infrastructure. We've talked about the financial runway. So now let's talk about factor number five. You've got to have a support structure because think about when you're in captive, and for me at State Farm, we had sales leaders, we had agency field specialists, we had individuals that were coming into our office, helping to train our team, letting us know of different updates, changes in underwriting guidelines, really providing us that business acumen so that we are at our optimal best. That's not going to be the case as an independent. All of that is now falling on you. And one of the biggest, I would say, cons or parts that I really had to grapple with when I went independent is really building my own support structure, because I no longer had the sales leader. I no longer had an agency field specialist. I no longer had those individuals that were kind of helping me from a training standpoint. And so agents who struggle the most in the transition are the ones who try to navigate everything on their own. Um, they research everything themselves, they make decisions by themselves, they're in isolation, and they are learning by trial and error. But the agents who thrive are the ones who kind of surround themselves with really good advisors. So this leads me to our next topic, which is, and Rosalind's going to speak a little bit to this on why a business consultant changes everything and what help a business consultant can provide.
Yes. Having a business consultant who understands the landscape of, moving from captive to independent. If you're working with someone who just knows what it is to be independent, it could look different in regards to what does it actually feel like, look like when you are moving and making this transition, right? So having someone who understands that, like we do here, like we have here at DPI, is really allowing you to have a mentor in this space that can help you to help guide you through some of this that Renee has been talking about and also what you see on the screen. So, contract review, we are able to refer you to someone who is able to look at all of your contracts when you're doing your carrier appointments and you're building your infrastructure and there's different contracts that you are filling out in regards to your software, your IT team. You want to make sure that you are having that reviewed by an attorney, legal counsel that is there for your best interest, not someone that is just trying to get additional billable hours. So, knowing someone that is well vetted, that cares about you as an individual is incredibly important because for every business transaction, there should be a contract and there should be legal counsel that is reviewing that. The second thing is the business planning. And a lot of times we are thinking only from a financial perspective, but how are you going to position yourself? The only information that you have received in regards to branding has been under a captive umbrella. And so a realistic business planning and strategic plan is how are you going to position in the marketplace? Are you going to compete on volume? Are you going to compete on being an educator in this space and taking the time to walk people through this confusing world of insurance coverage? Who is your target audience? This is a very saturated space in regards to being an insurance agent. And so, strategically, a consultant is going to be able to help you understand who is your target audience, how are you able to speak to them. Consumer behaviors have changed. It used to be where you would just kind of look on Google and figure out, hey, insurance agent near me. Now, with AI tools, the way that you are being discovered is completely different. A business consultant is going to be able to help you with that as well as marketing support. Carrier strategy, we have someone obviously on our team that understands carrier strategy. It is a strategy. It's not
Mhm.
just let me make appointments. Renee, do you want to talk
Yes,
about
it
that?
is because when you talk about carrier strategy, you really have to understand the demographic that you're going after, what your niche market is, and you feel like when you open that independent agency that you want to have access to every single carrier that is available to you. But I would caution you with doing that because a lot of carriers have requirements. If you are not writing 2 to 3 policies with them a month, then they can terminate your appointment. And trust me, if you ever have an appointment terminated, it is nearly impossible to get that appointment back. If you try to apply for another appointment with a totally different insurance company, they will ask, have you ever had a carrier appointment terminated? You don't ever want to have to check yes on that part of your application. So you definitely want a strategy. You don't want to have all insurance companies, you being able to be appointed with them. You want to go after the ones that are writing and have the most from a standpoint of cost-effective options for your customer.
Yes. So carrier strategy. You don't want to you don't want you do not want to waste time and resources that are so precious and limited as you are making this transition. Going back to the business planning, also the financial projections. When are you going to be able to break even? The technical systems and setups that Renee talked about. How do you avoid costly mistakes? Do you need a team of two? Do you need a team of 12? You want a business consultant is going to be able to help, provide an implementation roadmap, a timeline so that you are able to pace yourself during this transition, helping
And
you
Rosin,
avoid.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject this because when you talk about tech and systems, which is so vitally important, we shared a little bit about it. But there are so many things you have to think about from a standpoint of who's going to host my website. Will I maintain my same URL? What is my CRM? What rater will I use? What phone system will I use? What E&O coverage or carrier will I use? Because now all of that has to be determined by you, and you don't want to go alone, as I did. Those were decisions I was making on my own, before I, had a business consultant kind of walking me through it. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
say that.
Yes, legal structure. You will not be able to do this without having legal counsel, almost your own board of advisors, which a consultant is really helping you fill that gap. Um, the other one that is not on here, but incredibly important, and I know Renee is going to be able to speak about this, is the shift in your mindset. When you go from being captive to independent, it is a completely different mindset. And if you are not having a consultant next to you to help you understand how you need to change that mindset, that you have this freedom that you haven't been able to have before because there's been constraints on and regulations on what you're able to post or not post. And that's just one example. But Renee, can you talk a little bit about how the consulting piece really helped you with the mindset that frames how you're able to take on this type of new adventure?
Yes. Well, because I had grown up, because of course I worked corporately with State Farm for 23 years and then 2 years as an agent. And when you talk about this mindset shift, one example, when I was in the captive arena, it was very focused on units. How many units? At that time, we had a report called the Front Run, and it would show all of the agents in your territory and rank you based on how many units you sold. And for the longest, that was what I tracked, units. Well, we get paid on premium. So why would I spend so much time with my team tracking units when I get paid on premium? And so that was a total mindset shift. We no longer track units. It doesn't matter to me that you sold 100 policies in a month, because if you sold 100 renter policies that are like $150 each, what that is not really driving a lot of premium into the office. So what we track now is premium. Our goals are based on premium. And so just even little mindset shifts like that, you have the autonomy to make those decisions for your office.
Yes, thank you, Renee. So, is there a cost to having a business consultant? Yes, but nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the cost of a misstep in the beginning during a major business transition. I've seen agents lose momentum, lose money, lose sleep because they didn't have a consultant to help them avoid some of those missteps. So, here's something that I want you to hear, that even though the changes are being announced in whether it's 2027 or 2028, the time to begin exploring is now. And like Renee said, we're not advocating for you should stay being a captive or you should stay being an independent, but this is about you understanding what your choices are and what's behind each of those choices. Now is the time to, if you are deciding that you want to go into being an independent, that carrier relationships, you have time to build those. The financial planning, you have time to put in place those safeguards so that you don't feel blindsided by the impact of the financial piece in regards to opening your own independent agency. The more runway you give yourself, the more lead time that you give yourself, the more leverage that you have, the smoother their transition. And also, it allows you to be able to just have more choices when you are ahead of the game in regards to planning. So, again, it's not about making a decision today, but gathering information, having consultants, having a team like DPI, and having Renee. Renee, I'm so thankful that it was in your heart, because this is here because of all the questions that you received, many of them confidential that you cannot even go into. But this
Mhm.
information is critical in making the right choice, understanding the law, the landscape, without having the cost of someone saying, hey, I'm going to charge you $3,000 just to tell you what you're getting today.
Mhm.
It just gives you everything. So, Renee, I know that you've talked a lot about your own personal journey, but I want to kind of shift it back to you and tell us about your own personal story in regards to making this transition.
Yeah, and I worked corporately, with State Farm for
So we had a little technical difficulty, and Renee is going to continue talking about her journey. But I did want to have this piece on, just showing, I forgot to say it, about having that runway, had talked about that timeline and how you have time to explore your options. So this is just a visual of that. But now, Renee, tell us about your own personal journey.
Yes, and one of the things that I was getting ready to say, and I think that was at the point that I got cut off. Of course, I worked the 23 years corporately, 2 years as a State Farm agent in the Tampa Bay area. But then you kind of get to a place where built it from scratch, started from scratch, built it from scratch. And pain point was wanted to be able to provide options because State Farm is a great company, but it was not the best fit for all of the customers that I wanted to service. And so independent agency allowed me an opportunity to provide options and choices to the customer. It also allowed me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. It is very important for me. If you go to my Instagram, I love to do videos. And so, because I want to be seen as a subject matter expert in the insurance space, and I wasn't able to do that as a captive agent. And so those were my pain points. And so that's what led me to the decision. But I started looking at my options very early. And so because I had looked at my options early, my State Farm contract ended April 30th of 2020, smack dab in the middle of COVID. And then May 1st, 2020, the very next day, I opened my doors as an independent agency. And that was because I had started looking at what my options were while I was still working as a captive agent, but making sure that I knew what was available to me. I really it was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. I wish I would have kind of researched it a little bit more, kind of understood what I needed to do to make a really smooth, successful transition. Um, it was successful in the fact that we are still here 6 years later. We manage about 3.6 million in premium. And so that's a blessing in and of itself. But there were pitfalls, there were costly mistakes, there were things that I didn't consider. And so that was why when I heard the announcement, I wanted to offer myself as a resource to help think through all of the things because it may not be for you to leave right now, or it might be time for you to leave. And so here I am today. We're licensed in Florida, in Georgia. My entire team is hybrid. I don't have a brick and mortar. That's another great thing is that when you go independent, you don't have to have brick and mortar. You do have to have some type of space. You can't run it out of your house. So and that varies by state, but from a standpoint, I have an executive suite and hiring team is hybrid. And so that provides cost savings from an operational standpoint. So I built the agency around the values that I wanted to build, and that was customer relationships, education, and always being client focused, never being commission focused. And I think on the next slide, it actually shows what our values are, which, you're going to determine if you decide to go independent, what your culture is and what your values are. So this is kind of my call to action to you, because if you're listening to this, if you've received this, you're looking at your options, you're exploring your options, which is great. That's exactly what you should be doing at this point. The question has never been whether you're capable of succeeding as an independent agent, right? Because you're already a successful entrepreneur. The question is whether you have the right plan, the right support, and the right information to make the move successfully. You have spent years building your brand as an entrepreneur. And so if I made the leap, it works. It can work for you as well. I am proof that you can go from being captive into independent agency with the right prep, the right opportunity, and make it work. So this QR code takes you to my website where you can schedule time on my calendar. I'm opening up my calendar. August 6th is a date that I've set aside where we can have 15 to 30 minutes, kind of just talk through any questions that you have, what your pain points are, any questions that you may have for me, because there's some things that I'm not sharing with regard to commissions, what pay looks like, what I made during the first year, when I received my first check, and all of that. That's something that we can kind of speak one-on-one because, this will be released on YouTube. But any questions, that's my QR code. Feel free to reach out. It has been a pleasure to share. No matter what you do, Rosin and I wish you the best success in your agency. Have a
Yeah.
great day.
And thank you to all of the listeners for your patience as we have navigated this technical difficulty here. We appreciate you being with us. Renee, I want to say a huge thank you. I know that this was something that you wanted to do to be able to impart
Yes.
your wisdom. So thank you so much. And as always, this has been brought to you by DPI LLC. You can visit us on our website, DPI, the number 2.com. Or if you want to get in touch with Renee, her website is reneeisyouragent.com. Have a wonderful day, evening, or morning, whichever it is for you.